Welcome, fellow wine lovers. This is the Wine Ghost podcast. I'm Mate Vash, a certified sommelier and seeker of hidden stories behind the most mysterious drinking history. So grab a glass, get comfortable, and listen how today's ghosts get out of the bottle. In this episode, you'll get to know Florian Zaruba, the German CEO behind the Kristinus Wine Estate from Hungary. Florian was already leading the winery while I was working there, during which period he made a big impression on me. He has been active in the vineyard and cellar work and mastering wine marketing on social media himself. We talked about the terroir and wines of Kristinus, the advantages of biodynamic farming, different wine markets around the world, and his approach of leading the winery into the future. I very much enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure he has a lot to say to everyone interested in wine in this almost 1 hour long episode. Welcome to the show, Florian. How are you today?
Hi, Mate. Yeah, thanks. I'm fine. Just about finishing the harvest. So everything is good.
Nice, good to hear. And recently just decided to turn the Kristinus into a biodynamic vineyard. So could you tell a little bit about that? Which transformations are going on right now, maybe from this harvest on? What are you doing right now, or what are the biggest changes now?
Yeah, we started about this 1 year ago now. So it's already the first harvest which we treated everything in biodynamic way, even if we are not certified now, but we are working on this. It's a longer process. Yeah, there were big major changes. So we are not using any artificial pesticides or fertilizers anymore since over a year. So we had to rethink completely everything, how we treat our vineyards and how the whole way of thinking, so the biodynamic way it's a holistic thinking and kind of philosophy as well. It's including the nature, and the goal is to keep everything healthy and in good conditions, and not like the conventional farming, always fighting some enemies or diseases. So it was a big step for us, but it worked out very well the first year. We had no high pressure on disease in our vineyards, and we have beautiful fruits, tasty fruits, little smaller fruits, what we also wanted, and a little bit less yield, but this also depended this year on the flowering. It was not as good as the years before because it was a little bit rainy. So we are very happy. Also comparing our neighbors, they had more problems in conventional than we in biodynamic. So it was a really good start.
Which changes do you already see in the vineyards from this vintage on, maybe in comparison with recent vintages?
Yeah, there are some really interesting and big changes already in the first year. Mainly the biodiversity is rising very much. So we have a lot of helping insects coming back, which are helping us to protect the grapes and the leaves, like predator mites or spiders. And as the birds are coming back, they feel much more comfortable. Also, more animals which are not primarily important for us, like hare or deer and things like this. We see much higher activity in our vineyards. And also, we did a lot of green work, especially for the covering crop on the ground. So we seeded a lot of leguminosen and things which producing their own nitrogen collectors, but also a lot of flowers which give a habitat for helpful insects. and it changed the whole environment also for us because it looks much nicer. So, and it's a positive energy there, which was not there before. And sure, you go there in with a much more good feeling, better feeling, if you don't use any harmful chemicals like also glyphosate or things like this. So you feel really much more comfortable. And not only me, also a lot of workers are very surprised how this development already started in the first year. And the fruits are very nice as well. So they are very healthy. This year was some high pressure of black rot in Hungary. A lot of people had to suffer in the vineyards, but we had really no problems. And yeah, so we are very happy, and we can see the development, and we have really good fruits, very tasty, very ripe, and good sugar levels. So it was really a good year. We were a little bit afraid, sure, of these changes as well, because we did not know what will happen, but we had for sure also some help from people with a lot of experience who showed us a lot of little secrets and how to do it. So it was really good, and it's a good development, I think.
And where did the idea come from, or what was the main motivation behind it? Because some also claim that wines can only reflect their true sense of place, so their terroir, if the vineyard is farmed at least organically. Do you think it was one of the main motivations for you to change from conventional into this way?
Yeah, there were some motivations, but from the perspective of winemaking, this was the priority, because in many parts in agriculture, also in winemaking, it becomes more and more a kind of food industry. You get everything is produced by chemical companies which are helping you to produce higher crops, and in the vineyard you need a lot of different pesticides to get a good result, and it continues in the cellar that every yeast is cultivated. You need yeast food, you need nutritions, you need this and that and monoprotein and bam, and your product becomes more and more mainstream because everybody is using it. So the grape itself had not the attention anymore, which is expressing a vineyard or a winery. So the terroir became less and less important, and all the additions and all the things around, which is not from the vineyard, which is from different companies, became the major effect on a wine. So the wine got more mainstreaming and more comparable. You were competing suddenly. If you make a Sauvignon Blanc, you could decide to make a Sauvignon Blanc New Zealand style if you buy the right yeast, and suddenly Kéthely was in competition with Marlboro or whatever. So it was really weird, and this we wanted also to change, to show our wines and our terroir and make it unique. And that's one big step or one big point to change to biodynamic. But it was not the only one. It was also for us very important to get more sustainable. And I think it's time for change in agriculture as well. And the winemakers have a big attention in society and media. They can go ahead and can be a role model to show that it's possible to work with less pesticides and with less poisonous things, because they have the attention of the public, and they can be an opinion leader. And that was also important for us. Beside this, that I think that a lot of things will be forbidden in the near future, like glyphosate, for example, but others as well. So we want to be ahead before it's a rule, and then you are in a hurry to do something where you have no experience in, right? So there are also some studies, important studies from Geisenheim and other important universities, that the biodynamic way is for example, the only way of agriculture which is building up humus and which has a vital soil life, and the biodiversity is good, and
which is truly sustainable, right?
It is, yeah, it's the only way.
You were talking also about reflecting back the terroir. Could you tell us a little bit about the unique terroir of Kristinus, and maybe how different parcels, like I know, for example, Parapli, and you also have designated parcels, how did they really reflect on these changes? And could you tell us a little bit about the microclimate and maybe the soil of the Kristinus vineyards?
Yeah, sure. So we are on the south side of Balaton. So we have quite a rich soil, but also with a lot of, in some parts, especially like Parabli and Verredorm, with beside clay, the deeper layer, we have quite a black soil with a lot of also rich humus, but also a lot of limestone in it, and it's producing mainly more richer wines, complex wines with which are ripening very well. So it's a continental, but already a little bit warmer climate here. We are lucky we are surrounded by oak forest on our hills, and on the other side we have the Balaton, and this both has a very strong effect on the microclimate, macroclimate, and the microclimate is also again different because we have different vineyards in different locations. But sure, it has a balancing effect on temperature, humidity. Since ages, this area, designated area for winemaking, we are really profiting from all these things.
And also, can you tell us maybe a little about the grape varieties, what you use, and what were really the main decisions behind also the new plantings? Because I heard that you also kind of experimenting with other native Hungarian varieties, and could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So we have quite wide variety of grapes. What is typical in this area, we have Pinot Gris, Syrah Barat, Keck Frankos, Blaufränkisch. We have now Furmint. So these are the varieties which are originally from this area. We make also Irjae Oliver, very typical variety from this area. But also we have some international varieties like Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc. In red wines, we have Merlot, Cabernet, Sauvignon, and Cabernet Franc, and some little others, but they are in amount not so interesting. Yeah, like Grüner Veltliner and Zweigelt we have also. And
also you mentioned Furmint, which is not maybe the most typical one in the southern at the southern shore at Lake Balaton. What were really the main considerations behind planting this variety?
So it's a very famous and typical variety in Hungary, and we were just curious how it will develop in our soil and in our terroir. We just planted it 2 years ago, so I cannot tell you the actual result of the wine, but the grapes are developing very nice. It's a very good vineyard on a slope in south direction. So we are very curious for it. We hope maybe in not next year, but after next year, we will have the first virgin harvest. But it's a variety which can also produce very, very rich wines. And that's why we were curious how it can be in this area. It's a kind of experiment. And we do a lot of experiments all the time because they're curious. But about the result, I cannot tell anything at the moment. There we must make another time a next podcast in 2 years.
That's how you should schedule your podcast. You come from Germany, and I think you have a very unique perspective, also not only on Hungarian wine, but also on the world of wine. You have a really open mind, and it's maybe very important in a kind of traditional wine market. Can you maybe tell us that how do you really see the wine market and your place or the place of Kristinus in this wine market?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's as you said, it's there are different reasons, but I think in the latest history of Hungary, so especially during the time of the Iron Curtain and the communism and things like this had some side effects which are still visible or influencing the market. So it's a very closed market in the beginning. There are quite a lot of wineries. Hungary has a huge and complex wine culture, and that's very good. There's a lot of knowledge. There are a lot of different wine regions which are producing different varieties, different styles of wine, and with long history as well. It's the winemaking is deeply rooted nearly in, I have sometimes the feeling, in every family. So it's not like everybody has at least somewhere a row of wine for making a house wine or something. So everybody is involved, and
at least at the consumption. Yeah.
That's important. That's important. And that's very positive. But on the other side, so I have often the feeling there's not a movement to bring into the world all this knowledge and this history, and also there are great wines. Sure, if everybody is doing a wine, there are also some wines which are not on the international level, maybe. Yeah. That doesn't matter. But it's a very introverted market, I would say, nearly. Yeah? So, and we also, because we are new, and maybe because of me, that I'm used to be a European person or open-minded person, we try also to bring this way of winemaking and our wine region and Kéthely and our wines to an international market due to different reasons, because I think it's worth to show the world that Hungary makes beautiful and great wines. And on the other side, also because it's compared, especially to the producers, it's a small market, so it's much more difficult to sell the wines here. And it's also, they make all themselves a competition, and that's also not very good for the price. And I'm not talking about making a huge fortune with wine. I'm just talking about that winemaking in a professional scale is also expensive. So you must always invest again. And I think it's important that Hungary develops in this, that the good wines must have a good price just to compete in the future with the world market, and to reinvest in new machines technology, whatever the change from conventional to biodynamic costs also money, and there will be some others has to follow. So yeah, I think that's the biggest task that Hungary develops in this way, to show outside of Hungary that the wines are good, because still it's difficult to sell Hungarian wine in, at least in Western Europe. As long as.
And why do you think it really is? What are the main reasons behind it?
There were, as I said, after the or in the time of the communism and after it, there was a lot of bad wines, because like always in this time, it's only about the quantity and not the quality. And to change this image, beside Tokai wine, that's a important for all winemakers in Hungary. I think that's an important wine region for export, because they prove all the time that they have exceptional wines, because it was a icon always, right? And there was always a special focus on it, and that shows that extraordinary wines are possible from Hungary. So, but I think that the quality, the lack of quality in this time is the biggest problem.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think are the biggest differences between the Hungarian and German wine market? I'm sure there are plenty, because these two countries are not so far away, but also in a way very different. What do you think are the biggest differences, and what do maybe German winemakers do better?
In the wine market, I think the biggest difference is that besides the traditional wine regions in Germany, that the Germans are very open-minded for products, for wine which is imported to Germany. There are some countries, especially countries which have in the whole area nearly wine producing, like France, Italy, I don't know, Hungary. They are very focused to their own productions, because it's there. Why you should import something? They are very proud of it. Why we should take something from outside? So Germany has big parts of the most parts of Germany are not producing wine. There are some regions which make excellent wine, but they are small compared to the rest. So the rest of Germany, market-wise, is very open-minded, I think. On the producer side, the biggest difference, I would say, is they have, compared to Hungary, much more experience. Means in all family wineries, nearly, right? In Germany, you find nearly no winery which is 40 or 50 years old. They are hundreds of years old, or things like this. So it's from generation to generation to generation, a long time. You can find maybe in Hungary, I would say, a handful of wineries which has constantly quality productions over, I don't know, 200 years. Maybe you know it better. Who is it and how many percent it is? I think that's quite big difference. And then sure, there was maybe not as long this change from, they changed earlier back to quality. There was also a long time where you could buy a lot of cheap Scheurebe or whatever, but this is mainly maybe 40 years ago, and then a lot of wineries started to change back to quality. I think they have some, they are a little bit ahead in time.
As a CEO, Kristinus is a very complex company, or a touristic enterprise, maybe I should say, because you have a hotel, you have a wine cinema, you have a restaurant, you have a winery, and you are very present in the, not only in the Hungarian wine market, but also at different festivals. And so you are very visible, so to say. What do you see the biggest maybe challenges are to present and to market such a complex enterprise?
Yeah, sure. The hotel and restaurant makes it a little bit more complex and makes it especially more, you need to share sometimes your resources for these things. That's, I think, the task. But I would not say the focus is the winery, and the hotel and the restaurants is a good tool to show it to people, because we are really on the countryside, what is beautiful on one side, but it's also not so easy to visit. And then also in Hungary, it's the 0 promille for driving, so you cannot even taste a glass of wine and drive. So I think it's for us also a kind of marketing tool to invite people, to invite potential customers, buyers, influencers, whatever, to have a chance to really visit the estate and see everything. And the other side is that we believe that wine is a cultural heritage, and wine always should bring people together, because there's a nice saying that the best wine is the wine you drink with friends, right? So that you can enjoy together this cultural product. And for this, we do the events here, music events and sport events, that we are also a meeting point where people can come together and enjoy together the life. And that makes it sometimes more complex, that's correct, but it makes it also more interesting. And it's a very nice possibility of this winery to bring all these things together.
I think it's a very good way to maybe improve also the wine tourism in the region, because as you mentioned, you are really in the countryside, and Hungary, I think, or Hungary's tourism is really focusing on Budapest, unfortunately, or at least the international tourism. And I think it's a beautiful place to visit. And as you said, you also you focus on the winemaking, but it's what Hungary is lacking, wine tourism aspect of the business. And I think that's where you have a really great advantage. And then you, as you said, that with these events and also with the hotel, I mean, at least at the Balaton, is it's a very good opportunity and a very big advantage. Could you tell maybe listeners a little bit about Balaton and how do you think it could change, because it's a very so to say summer destination, and do you think it's gonna change in the future, and it's gonna maybe it's gonna have an effect on your business side and maybe on the wine tourism side?
Yeah, absolutely. It's already changing. When I came here nearly 5 years ago, it was already totally different to now. You find nowadays much more quality places. Doesn't matter if restaurant, beaches, hotels, leisure activities. Also the wine tourism got much better in the last years. It was in 5 years ago, I had the feeling nobody tries really to attract people to make a wine tour. Sure, there's always somebody you can visit, but that people are working together, or that there are associations which are pushing this topic, this was much less. And there's already a big improvement in this quality tourism, I would say. And that's very good, because there were, I can say, a lot of horrible Germans always around Balaton in the summer. And this also is changing. Sure, there are also still places where you can make an affordable holiday, and there's nothing bad about it, because everybody deserves a holiday which he can pay, but the diversity is raising, and that's very good. So you can find places what you like. There nowadays also, I say, hipster places and quality places and food places, and also local markets in high quality, and the bio topic is getting more into the focus, and also activities after and before the season, because the season here at Balaton is quite short, what is also strange for me, that because also in the spring, autumn, and winter time, you can have here a beautiful holiday in very diverse nature as well. So on the north with the volcanic, on the south with the little hills and forests and horse riding, I don't know, hunting. So there are plenty of opportunities. But this is what you mentioned there. The tourism, the official tourism, is working mainly on Budapest, and the countryside does not get what it deserves, maybe, for what is possible. Yeah.
You are a very active wine tourist, so to say, or you visited a lot of wine regions. Mm-hmm. And are there any places what you look at as maybe a positive example of what you can relate to, and where you could learn maybe a lot? What or your favorite regions maybe?
Yeah. I'm a person who always wants to learn, and I'm very curious, so I can learn everywhere something. So I was not in any wine region where I would say now, it's not true there. No, but the most wine regions I really love, because you can always see differences and how they do it and what is the result, and the different influences of terroir and things like this. So I think if you're interested in wineries, winemaking, wine, there is hardly a professional wine region where you could say, that was not interesting. But sure, there are some which were more impressive, and some which are just from the feeling, I would say, less impressive. So sure, I loved South Africa, but it's just a stunning country, and you arrive there and everything is overwhelming. So the wine is in Australia, I have been visiting a lot of places, also amazing. But also if you go to South Tyrol, Alto Adige, what I really love a lot, very close. It's totally different than to Mosel region, for example. Yeah, but it's really difficult to say for me which is my favorite. In general, I'm more cold climate and as a more European wine region lover, because I like the wine styles more. It's easier to travel. You can find easier parallels to us, and maybe because I'm European, I always felt they're very very home. But there are a lot of more to experience. I loved also Bordeaux. Yeah, that's it's super professional. It's very impressive from the heritage, from the history, from but it's also they use the most pesticides in the world, right? Still, so you can find there some not so nice things, but sure, all these chateaux, Saint-Emilion, this feeling, wine is all around you, and stunning food. But on the other side, the lobby and the chemical lobby is so strong there, like nowhere else in the world, right?
I'm nearly not as experienced wine tourist as you, But what I also love in Europe, that you can find a lot of history there behind the wines. And
Yeah.
also, as you mentioned, that in Hungary we are lacking these multi-generational wineries because of the war and the Iron Curtain, what you mentioned. But for example, in Alsace, you can, or in Mosel, you can easily find like the 15th generations of winemaker,
Yeah.
and that gives really a backbone of the wine, maybe, or the winery, or the wine history. And
Absolutely, yeah, that was for me also amazing, especially in Mosel region when I was traveling. They, they know really their vineyards like a house in which they are living since they are born. They know really every stone. They can, if you show them a bunch of the berries of different vineyards, they can see on the bunch which vineyard it is, and on every taste. And it was very impressive. Yeah, they are living their wine, right? And that's, I think, it's a huge advantage for they know already before the harvest how it will be. I have the feeling.
There are some up and coming markets, so to say, or I shouldn't say up and coming, because China is already one of the biggest markets, for example, in the world for wine. And how do you see now how it's maybe changing, because Europe was once the very center of the winemaking, and you also been at the Pro Wine, I think in China, right?
Shanghai.
In Shanghai. And how, or what were your experiences, or how did they perceive the Hungarian wines or your wines? And what do you see the biggest differences are in these markets?
Yeah, it's China is in a lot of things very impressive, and it's a it's a new market, like you said as well, new and not new. I mean, they have already wineries there which are 6,000 hectare big and things like this. So it's, we are nothing for them. It's a very interesting market. I have been there 2 times, but it's also a difficult market because on one side they are so big that they need either huge and cheap quantities and qualities, and or on the other side they buy just the next 3 vintages of a chateau, which are even not were in flowering, right? So for millions of euros. So it's and in between where I see us, I realized it's difficult. Then you must be really because, as I said, yeah, if you have 1 million bottles from one wine, what is already a huge quantity for Europe, then there you have even not the chance to get into a supermarket, for example. Yeah? It's a nothing for them. If you imagine, only Shanghai has, I think now 23 million people are living in one city. And the next city, which you never heard the name, the little city has only 11 million.
Even more than Hungary.
Yeah, exactly. And then you come and you have a good wine with 16,000 bottles. And okay, it's really, they said to us, we are a little boutique winery, so we should go more to little tastings and things like this. So it's totally different dimensions, right? I think it's very interesting market, and if you already established in Europe and things like this, you can find there good markets, good restaurants. They have super gastronomy in the big cities. The highest numbers of Michelin star restaurants are in this big Chinese city. Shanghai, I think, has the most ones. But then you must be really active there and have good connections, and it's possible. But we decided now to concentrate more on European markets first, and then making a step back maybe to China. But at the moment we we let it go.
Because you mentioned you have also international varieties and Hungarian varieties, so traditional and also international. How do you see also the European market and also maybe the Chinese market? What do they really look for, or how could you really what distribution channels could you really leverage on?
So I think in Europe there at the moment, to make it very easy, three markets which you can serve. One is the mainstream market, right? There it doesn't matter so much for the people which varieties you use. They want a easygoing and enjoyable wine. Then you have a market where the people are interested, and at the moment the people are very interested in local varieties which are connected to the area, because they are much more interested in wine, and it's at the moment a trend to experience local products and things like this. So they are not looking for, as I said in the beginning, a Sauvignon Blanc from Kéthely, which tastes like from New Zealand. Why? So they want Sucre Barat, Ijay Oliver, Fumint, Kek Francoche, whatever. And the third thing, what is a strong movement at the moment is, how to call it, the natural wine, the low intervention wines, and the bio and biodynamic wines. They are all put it in one bottle, but it's very different topics. So there is no natural wine because it's always it's a cultural product. So there are a lot of influences, but I know what they mean. So it's wines which have low intervention, no additions, things like this. And this are the three markets at the moment which are very strong in Europe and the Western world, in the US as well, and Canada is also very focusing on it. And so with our varieties, we can offer to all the three groups, but we are focusing more and more on a higher quality. So, and the change, what I said, what we are doing. So for us, this mainstream market becomes less interesting because we will focus on bio and biodynamic wines, but not on this orange wine style. So our style we will have some wines which are experimental, showing these things, but our focus is to do with biodynamic grapes and biodynamic cellar work, but a controlled wine. This means we using temperature control in fermentation, and maybe not so long skin contact like others. Not every wine must be an orange wine from white wines, right? So there are possibilities, like you know it as well. I like very much Larkeder. They do the same, but they have only biodynamic wines. But if you show somebody who is not very deep into winemaking, they would not realize that it's a biodynamic wine, maybe.
Yeah. That's how you kind of structure your wine portfolio also, because you have different spheres for wines, or different categories, or different lines, so to say.
Yeah, at the moment we still have in these three categories wines, it's true, but so due to that, we will also change our basic category to bio, at least later to biodynamic. It will also change. The entry level will rise in quality with the next years, and also.
And on the highest level, it's a sommelier line, right?
Yeah.
And this is all mostly for restaurants, right? Or for small vinotheques, or what were the main differentiating factors in these lines?
Yeah, sure. The main difference is starting again for sure in the vineyards. So we focus on these blocks much more, with much more handwork, with much more, also sometimes a little bit more experimental, so that we try different canopy work or different pruning methods, keeping the yields lower, paying much more attention to the covering crop, controlling it more often, and then it continues with pre-selection, with a positive or negative selection before the harvest, and handpicking, then sorting in the winery on the shaking and sorting table, and special that's white or red pressing, longer skin contact for whites, for example, more over pumping, punch down, micro oxidation, maybe. So a lot of energy and focus is put into this wine, and then also the aging in barrels, claver, or amphora, what we all three use. That at the end we make again a selection, barrel or claver or amphora selection, which are the best ones and which are the best for blending, and then we have the best possible result from this vintage, and this becomes sure then also extra nice packaging.
Sure. And what because I think it's a very interesting presentation, what do you see the biggest differences are between these different vessels, and what does it really bring to the wine, for example the amphora or the barrel?
Now, yeah, the barrels, especially new barrels, toasted barrels, are more a spice, is added extra beside the micro oxidation, which develops then third level aromas. But we are going to use more and more at least one-time use barrels or third-time use barrels and claver and amphoras, because we don't want to change so much the original wine. So it's also developing, and sure, it's developing additional aromas and flavors, but it's not so dominated by the oak. And I think that's also a trend in winemaking, which I personally like, because it brings out also again much more the terroir. That's why we use all three methods, and we will also balance it. So at the moment we still have a lot more barrels, but we will invest more in claver in the future to have a good possibility to level these things.
You said that you are an innovative winery, and also you have a lot of ideas, and what you bring, it's constantly changing. Where do you really get your impressions from, or which books would you maybe recommend on biodynamics, or what do you really read, or do you have any favorite books or sources where you go to?
Mm-hmm. So I to be honest, I prefer much more. I have a lot of personal contact, so exchange on practical level, I think it's nearly the best. I try to work with advisors which are working in different wineries. For example, one from Austria who is specialized on bio and biodynamic. So he meets a lot of high-class producers from Austria. So I met some of them. Talking about these topics from practical side, I think it's always the best. But sure, you can also nowadays get a lot of impressions about social media, at least ideas, right? To get interested in, and then getting deeper. And but sure, I also read at the moment some actual books about biodynamic winemaking. I visited courses in Germany, for example, also for it. So with other people with same interest, it can be much faster. And a book for me is then the next level to get deeper knowledge about it. At the moment, I read a book. It's called Biodynamic, Organic and Natural Winemaking, for example, from Britt and Per Klaassen. But I have some others I'm reading as well. The book of Rudolf Steiner.
Yeah, sure. The founding father.
Yeah, the Holy Father. But it's very difficult. I have it also. So for me as a German to read it in German, it's already difficult.
Okay.
It has a very special own language, and he's really a genius, and he's writing very complex sentences, I would say.
Mhm.
And
maybe he drank while writing, got more ideas.
Yeah.
But also, you mentioned social media, and I think you are very active, and you have a very informative Instagram, I should say. And I think you are one of the people or one of the CEOs who are worth following, because you can also learn a lot and you can see a lot and you can really see behind the curtain, so to say. And what are your why do you really do it? Is to document your journey, or to also to educate the people, and also just to enjoy the process, or what are really your way of thinking to use social media? Because I think a lot of people and a lot of winemakers are missing on these new inventions, because these are quite almost free, so to say, but they are very informative and very useful. But I think you are very professional at that.
Yeah, first of all, not always I enjoy it, because it's also once you started, you must you have always the feeling you must do something. But on the other side, it's an important tool to show the people in an authentic way, because I think always the people can feel if it's authentic or not. Yeah. What we are doing, and it's important for me to give an impression about the work, not so much about myself, because that's a thing what I in general dislike in social media. It becomes very egocentric often and very extroverted, and it's for me also very boring. And it's I think the work what we are doing is important, but it should focus on these topics, and that's why I think maybe the people like it and they are interested. Also, I try always to make nice pictures for sure, because it's a nice area and it's a nice topic. So the topic deserves a good picture, and if you have some short entertaining lines, it helps also a lot. And then sure, I'm happy if people like it, because it's proof that we are on the right way. And on the other side, like you said, it's a possibility to get a more closer look to the things what we are doing, and that makes an important connection to our winery. So sure, it's a marketing tool. So but I think it's a good way to do it.
Yeah, and very effective and also very enticing. And you mentioned these great pictures, and I think wineries or wine regions are really, or mostly on the most beautiful sides of the world. So, and Kéthely is, I think, one of them, or the Balaton region for sure. Yeah. And I think only that's why Bert's following you. I'm gonna put your Instagram in the description for sure. And yeah, so Florian, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Martin, for this possibility. I appreciate it a lot. And sure, yeah, if somebody wants to visit Kristinus Winery or see the place or taste our wines, I'm always happy for contacts and meeting new people. So just let them know.
Sure, I will put it in the description. Okay, Florian, thank you for your time, and have a happy winter.